Emily Carter often wondered when the quiet had entered her marriage. It had not come suddenly, like a storm that breaks windows and leaves chaos behind. Instead, it arrived slowly, quietly settling into the spaces between conversations, between glances, between the small moments that once felt alive. 12 years earlier, when she had married Daniel Carter, their life together had been full of excitement. They had laughed often, talked late into the night, and dreamed about the future, like two people building something bright together. But now, their home in Oregon felt peaceful in a different way, calm, organized, predictable. And sometimes that calm felt a little too empty. Daniel was a good man. Emily never doubted that. He worked hard as an architect and cared deeply about providing a stable life for them. Every morning he left the house with a quick kiss on her cheek and a warm "see you tonight." Every evening he returned around the same time, usually tired but still polite and kind. They rarely argued. They respected each other's space and handled responsibilities together without conflict. From the outside, their marriage looked solid and mature, yet Emily felt something was missing. She first noticed it during quiet evenings at home. After dinner, Daniel would sit on the couch with his laptop or phone, sometimes reading articles about work or watching videos. Emily would sit beside him with a book from the bookstore where she worked part-time. Occasionally, they would exchange a comment about the show playing on television or discuss something simple like groceries or weekend errands. Their conversations were friendly but short. The deeper talks, the ones about feelings, dreams, fears, had slowly disappeared. Emily did not know exactly when that change had happened. Maybe it came with time, maybe it came with routine. Maybe life simply became busy and practical, but she missed the feeling of truly connecting with Daniel. Sometimes she would glance at him and remember the early years of their marriage. Daniel had once been endlessly curious about her thoughts. He used to ask questions about everything: what books she loved, what places she dreamed of visiting, what she feared most about the future. They had shared secrets and laughed about small things. Back then, their relationship felt alive and unpredictable. Now things were calmer. To calm. Emily never blamed Daniel for the change. She knew she had also become quieter. Over the years, she stopped sharing certain feelings, partly because she did not want to create unnecessary worry, and partly because she had convinced herself that silence was easier. But silence had a way of growing. One Tuesday afternoon, something happened that made Emily start thinking differently. The bookstore was quiet that day. Rain tapped softly against the windows while customers slowly wandered through the aisles. Emily stood behind the counter organizing new arrivals when her coworker, Laura, approached with a cup of coffee in her hand. Laura was a cheerful woman in her early 40s who loved talking about relationships and life stories. That day she seemed especially happy. "Guess what?" Laura said with a bright smile. "Yesterday was my 15th anniversary." Emily smiled warmly. "That's wonderful. Did you celebrate?" Laura laughed softly. "We did something small. Just dinner and a long walk. But we also did our little tradition." Emily tilted her head with curiosity. "What tradition?" Laura leaned against the counter, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Every few months, my husband and I ask each other one honest question. Something real. Something we might normally avoid." Emily looked intrigued. "Like what?" Laura shrugged gently. "Anything. Sometimes it's about fears. Sometimes it's about feelings. Sometimes it's something we've been too nervous to say out loud." Emily thought about that for a moment. "And it helps?" she asked. Laura nodded almost every time. "Sometimes the answers are uncomfortable. Sometimes we cry a little. But it always reminds us that we're still listening to each other." Those words stayed in Emily's mind long after the conversation ended. For the rest of her shift, she kept thinking about it. She realized that she and Daniel had not asked each other truly honest questions in a very long time. They talked about responsibilities and daily plans. but they rarely asked how the other person truly felt. By the time Emily closed the bookstore that evening, the idea had grown stronger in her mind. What if she tried it with Daniel? At first, the thought made her nervous. She worried he might find the idea strange. Daniel was practical and sometimes cautious about emotional conversations. But another part of her felt hopeful. Maybe this was exactly what they needed. The drive home that evening was quiet. Sky was turning orange as the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. Emily kept imagining how the conversation might go. She pictured Daniel laughing and saying it sounded silly. She pictured him changing the subject. But she also imagined something better. Moment where they actually talked honestly again. When Emily finally reached their house, she noticed Daniel's car already parked in the driveway. Inside, the warm smell of garlic and pasta filled the kitchen. Daniel stood at the stove stirring sauce, while soft music played from a speaker nearby. When he saw Emily enter, his face relaxed into a familiar smile. "Hey," he said, perfect timing. Emily walked over and kissed his cheek. "Smells good." Dinner felt normal and comfortable. They talked about small things Daniel mentioned, a project at work that had taken longer than expected, and Emily shared a funny moment from the bookstore, when a customer accidentally knocked over a stack of novels. But all through the meal, Emily felt a quiet nervousness in her chest. She kept thinking about Laura's idea. After dinner, they cleaned the kitchen together and then moved to the living room. Daniel sat on the couch and turned on the television. Emily curled up beside him with a mug of tea. For several minutes they watched the show in silence. Emily glanced at Daniel. He looked tired but peaceful, focused on the screen. Her heart began beating a little faster. If she wanted to ask the question, she had to do it now. She took a slow breath. "Daniel," she said softly. He looked over immediately. "Yeah." Emily hesitated for a moment, then forced herself to continue. "Can I ask you something a little unusual?" Daniel raised an eyebrow with curiosity, but did not seem worried. "Sure." Emily placed her tea mug on the table. "Today at work, my coworker told me about something she and her husband do," she explained. Every few months, they ask each other one honest question. Something real, something they might normally avoid. Daniel listened quietly. Emily continued, her voice gentle but slightly nervous. "I thought maybe we could try it." Daniel leaned back against the couch, thinking. Emily studied his face carefully, searching for any sign of annoyance or confusion. Instead, he simply looked thoughtful. "What kind of question?" he asked. Emily smiled faintly. "Any question, as long as it's honest." Daniel paused for another moment, then nodded. "All right," he said calmly. "Let's try it." Emily felt a sudden mixture of relief and fear. Now the moment had arrived. She had been thinking about one question all evening, but saying it out loud suddenly felt harder than expected. Her fingers twisted together slightly. Finally, she looked directly at Daniel. "Are you still happy with me?" she asked. That the question hung in the air like a fragile glass object. Daniel did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked down at his hands. Emily felt her chest tighten. The silence stretched longer than she expected. Seconds passed slowly, and each second made her heart beat faster. She suddenly wondered if she had made a mistake. Maybe the question had been too direct. Maybe she had opened a door that should have stayed closed. But then Daniel lifted his head and looked at her. His expression surprised her. There was no anger in his eyes, no frustration. Instead, there was something deeper, something thoughtful and almost vulnerable. "I was hoping you'd ask me something like that," he said quietly. Emily blinked in confusion. "You were?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah." Emily felt her curiosity grow. "Why?" Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he admitted, "about us." Emily's heart beat faster. "What kind of thinking?" Daniel looked at her carefully, as if choosing his words with great care. V, been wondering if we stopped being honest with each other somewhere along the way? Emily felt a strange feeling spread through her chest. It was not fear exactly, it was recognition, because she had secretly wondered the same thing many times. But hearing Daniel say it out loud made it suddenly real. She stared at him for a moment, unsure what to say. Finally, she whispered, "What do you mean?" Daniel sighed softly. "I mean, we still get along. We still care about each other. But sometimes it feels like we're living beside each other instead of truly connecting." Emily felt her throat tighten. Those words echoed her own hidden thoughts. For years, she had believed she was the only one feeling this distance. Now, she realized Daniel had noticed it too, and that realization changed everything. Because if they both felt it, then maybe they could also fix it. But Daniel wasn't finished speaking. He looked at Emily with a calm but serious expression. "There's actually something I've wanted to ask you for a long time," Kay said. Emily's stomach fluttered with nervous curiosity. "What is it?" Daniel took a slow breath. Then he asked a question that made Emily's heart race. "Do you think we've been protecting each other from the truth instead of sharing it?" The room fell silent again. Emily stared at him, feeling the weight of the moment. Because deep inside, she already knew the answer. Emily's heart was still racing after Daniel asked his question. The room felt smaller now, charged with an energy they hadn't felt in years. She realized the quiet between them wasn't emptiness, had been a wall built from unspoken thoughts and feelings neither had shared. And now that wall had cracked. "Maybe we have," Emily admitted softly, her voice trembling a little. "I think we've been protecting ourselves, afraid of making each other uncomfortable. But I've missed feeling truly connected with you." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes serious yet warm. "I've missed it too, more than I realized." He paused and reached for her hand. The touch was simple but grounding, like a lifeline in a sea of unspoken words. "I want to know everything you feel, Emily, even the things you think I might not understand." Emily swallowed. It was strange, feeling so exposed and safe at the same time. She had kept her thoughts bottled up for years, telling herself that nothing she felt was important enough to share. But now, Daniel's openness made her want to break that habit. "All right," she said, trying to sound calm. "If we're really doing this, I want to start with something small." She hesitated. "Do you ever feel lonely even when we're together?" Daniel's eyes softened and he let out a quiet sigh. "Yes," he admitted. "I thought I was the only one. Sometimes I just sit in the living room and it's like we're both here, but I don't know how to reach you." Emily's chest ached. She had felt the same emptiness many nights, lying awake beside him, wishing for the connection they once had. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. Instead, she smiled gently. "Then we're both in the same place, and maybe that's a good thing. At least, now we know." Daniel smiled, and it was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Yeah," he said softly, "at least now we know. And maybe we can do something about it." Emily nodded, a spark of hope stirring in her chest. "I want that," she said. "I want us to really talk again, to share, to laugh, to cry, to be honest even when it's scary." For the first time in years, the tension between them began to ease. Daniel leaned back on the couch, stretching his arms above his head. "So, what's the first question you want to ask me?" He teased lightly, but the playfulness in his tone didn't mask the sincerity in his eyes. Emily's mind raced. There, where so many things she had wondered about, fears she had buried, dreams she had stopped sharing. But she decided to start with something important, something that mattered deeply to both of them. "Daniel, do you still feel the way you did when we first met?" she asked. He looked surprised at first, then thoughtful. "I think about that a lot," he admitted. "I guess I got so focused on responsibilities on life that I forgot to remind myself of what brought me to you in the first place. But yes, I still feel it. I needed a moment to remember it." Emily reached for his hand again. "I feel it too," she said. "And I think maybe we just forgot to keep showing it." "To each other?" Daniel nodded. "Maybe that's what we need. Just a little honesty, a little courage, and a willingness to see each other again. Really see each other." They talked for hours that night, taking turns asking questions and answering honestly. Emily asked about his fears, his dreams, the moments he had felt happiest with her, and even the times he had been unsure about their life together. Daniel asked similar questions, and each answer felt like peeling back a layer they hadn't touched in years. At one point, Emily asked softly, "Do you ever regret anything about our marriage?" Daniel's eyes softened, and he shook his head. "No, not truly. But I do wish we had talked more, shared more. I think we both assumed the other understood what we were feeling, and that assumption built a distance between us. I don't want that anymore." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I thought I was being strong by not saying anything, but really, I was just lonely." Daniel pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Me too," he admitted. "But we can change that. Starting now." The night stretched on, and each question they asked brought them closer. They laughed at memories they had long forgotten, shared moments of vulnerability, and held each other through the feelings that surfaced. Emily realized that this simple idea, single honest question, had opened a door to a level of intimacy she hadn't experienced in years. At one point, Emily paused and looked at Daniel with wide eyes. "Do you want to try something different?" she asked cautiously. Daniel tilted his head. "What do you mean? Not anything extreme?" Emily said quickly. "It's just ways we can reconnect. More dates, little surprises, sharing thoughts we don't normally share. I think if we make space for that, we can rebuild what we've lost." Daniel smiled, a mix of relief and excitement in his expression. "I'd like that," he said. "I've been waiting for someone to take the first step. I just didn't know how to start." Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. "We can start tonight," she said. "We can start now." And they did. Over the next several weeks, Emily and Daniel made a new routine. Every evening, after dinner or before bed, they would sit together and ask one honest question. Some questions were lighthearted, some were serious, but all of them opened a window into their hearts. One night, Emily asked, "Do you ever feel like we stopped dreaming together?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, I think we did. But I want to start again. I want to dream with you, Emily, even if it's something small. Even if it's just us planning a weekend trip or imagining the house we want in a few years. I want to share that with you again." Emily smiled, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want to feel like we're partners, not just roommates in life." Another evening, Daniel asked, "Is there anything you've always wanted to tell me but were afraid I wouldn't understand?" Emily thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," she admitted. "I've been afraid that you don't notice me the way you used to. Not because you stopped loving me, but because we stopped noticing each other. We stopped showing it." Daniel reached for her hand. "I notice you," he said simply. "I notice you more than ever now. And I want to keep noticing you every day." Emily felt her heart swell with relief and gratitude. Right. It was as if a fog that had been hanging over their marriage had finally lifted. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen and heard. Their relationship began to transform. The quiet distance that had once filled their home was replaced with laughter, conversation, and small gestures of love. Daniel started leaving little notes for Emily, reminding her of things he appreciated about her. Emily planned small surprises for Daniel, like cooking his favorite meals or picking up tickets for a show he had mentioned months ago. Each act, however small, rebuilt trust and intimacy. One Sunday morning, they went for a walk along the Oregon coast. The air was crisp, the waves crashing softly against the rocks. Emily glanced at Daniel and smiled. "Do you remember when we first walked here together?" Daniel laughed softly. "I do. We were nervous teenagers, pretending we were so mature. Emily laughed too, feeling lighter than she had in years. I think we've grown, she said, but in a good way. We're learning to be honest again, to care truly in every moment. Daniel took her hand and squeezed it. I feel that too. And I think this, asking questions, being honest, it's only the beginning. We've opened a door we can walk through together every day. Emily looked out at the ocean, feeling the waves echo the rhythm of her heart. She realized that the courage to ask one simple question, the question about happiness, had transformed everything. It had reminded them that love is not just about comfort or routine. It is about connection, honesty, and the willingness to be vulnerable. And in that moment, walking beside Daniel, hand in hand, Emily knew something powerful. Their marriage was no longer just about living together. It was about truly being together, body, mind, and heart. From that day on, it continued their nightly ritual of questions, and each answer brought them closer, weaving a web of trust and intimacy that had long been missing. Emily realized that the hardest part had been asking the question, but the reward was beyond anything she could have imagined. They laughed more freely, shared their deepest thoughts without fear, and discovered a love that had been waiting under the surface, patiently, for the courage to emerge. By the time winter arrived, their home was warm in a new way. Not just from the fire burning in the living room or the tea in their hands, but from the renewed closeness and emotional honesty that now filled every corner. They had faced the quiet that had haunted them and had chosen to break it together. And in doing so, Emily and Daniel discovered that love, when nurtured with honesty and courage, could grow deeper, stronger, and more fulfilling than they had ever imagined. They had asked, they had listened, and they had found each other again. And that, Emily realized, was the greatest answer of all.